Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We have what I think is a most informative and interesting webinar this afternoon. I want to start first by recognizing the importance of this date to all Americans and in American history, particularly as the first responders jumped into action to save lives some years ago on 9/11. We'd be remiss not to make mention of that as we start the webinar. And secondly, I want to give recognition to the Bureau of Justice Assistance. That's part of the Office of Justice Programs of the U.S. Justice Department that's provided funding for smart policing that is the foundation of what we're going to be talking about today, smart policing and strategies for policing innovation. We're well into our 11th year. We've been fortunate to have strong support from BJA, and in particular, Kate McNamee, who's been the program manager there for this for quite some period of time. I'm Scott Decker, and I'll be introducing the team. There's some important principles that provide a foundation for policing innovation, and they are that it's data-driven. We pay attention to what the data says at the start, at the middle, at the end, after the project. Tend to work on problems that can be defined by community, by law enforcement, by joint action of both groups, work in collaborative ways, and try and provide sustainable innovations that will outlive the funding. One of the things that I think BJA does particularly well is encourage sites to think about what's going to happen when the money's been spent and the project is technically over. What is the city left with in terms of public safety? And in the two cities that are being highlighted today, there's certainly evidence of sustainability. If we go on to the next slide, what we'll see is a bit of discussion, identification of webinars and their role in strategies in policing innovation. Webinars such as we're doing today are critical to the process. They also contribute to sustainability. You'll hear today the first presentation will be led by the researcher, and the second will be led by law enforcement. And I think that really reflects the integration and coordination between members of a team dedicated to enhancing public safety. If you're interested in prior webinars, you can go to the CNA website and look at the Strategies for Policing Innovation site, and it's given in the slide right here. We'll move on to the next slide and identify just briefly the role of data in SPI. We know that the SARA model requires us to have data to identify problems, to determine their magnitude, to assess how we've done, and SPI follows that model. We're particularly interested in demonstrating outcomes and impact. Outcomes are more of the process, what did we do, and impact is what was produced. Data can help contribute to the development of best practices, and I know in what you'll hear today from Miami and Milwaukee that there is evidence that what they've done has made a difference in their cities, and we can build on that. If you're a city that's not been funded or struggling with similar issues and crime problems, you may want to follow up on what Miami and Milwaukee are doing. In particular, I would draw your attention to the 10-year report that CNA prepared looking at 10 years of SPI interventions. And again, a very useful document if you're contemplating doing new things in your city. We know that one of the things data does is it diffuses a project throughout the organization. Both our cities, again, are excellent examples of that. And we need to think differently and more broadly about data sources. Technology makes it near impossible for us not to be attentive to new sources of data, whether it's ShotSpotter or NIBIN or social network analysis or artificial intelligence. When we use the term data-driven, it's one of those terms that is perhaps used so often that it's lost some of its meaning. Data-driven means that data is used at each step of an intervention to identify problems, to define problems, to implement change, and to measure outcomes. And the best projects are data-driven, and that helps enhance sustainability. Data-driven can be a flexible process, but again, the data is used at every step. It evolves, and I think you'll hear in particular from Miami today about a project where the roles, especially that of the research partner, evolved from kind of a more distant partner to really a member of the team. And again, that emphasis on process and outcomes is important. A couple other examples of cities. Phoenix, for example, has integrated data-driven steps in their body-worn camera project, which has been integrated with other data sources in very innovative ways. In Chicago, ShotSpotter in particular has been integrated with other forms of data, evidence.com, for example, and in district-driven data centers that have analysts working with social network analysis, with ShotSpotter, with NIBIN, with evidence.com in the districts as a resource for officers, command staff, and detectives in the districts. And Glendale, Arizona, in an earlier SPI project, used data in an innovative way, in particular cameras, on-site video, to do some real-time prevention of robberies and thefts from quick shops. We reached some of the specifics about Miami. I think the things to keep in mind as the Miami team makes their presentation is the role of partnership, how partnerships and roles can change over time. That's particularly the case for the research partner. Being aware of unexpected outcomes. If we knew all the answers, I worked with a chief who once said, if we knew all the answers already, then we wouldn't have a crime problem. And so oftentimes we're surprised by or we face new or unexpected outcomes. GIS, social network analysis, data integration can all produce those, and I think we need to be prepared to, when we find them, to ask what they mean for our project. Think about the role that organizational change can play within a police department as well. Again, organizational change was important in Milwaukee and facilitated by the use of data. And the department will tell a bit of a story today about how it moved from somewhat isolated units within the police department to an integrated department-wide model, and that was facilitated in particular by pulling data from multiple sources, whether it was NIBIN, ShotSpotter, social network analysis, presentation software, and Tableau, which you're going to hear a good deal about, is being used in some departments across the country, Milwaukee, Chicago in particular. One of the key elements of the Milwaukee intervention was its offender-focused data analysis. The decision was made to focus on offenders rather than victims or rather than the characteristics of places, and that played out in ways that were positive for them in terms of having an impact on crime. And similar to Miami, the ability to build relationships across units. The next slide will take us to the handoff here to Rob Guerette and his team and their presentation on the data-driven project in Miami's SPI project. Rob, if you would.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Rob Guerette. I'm talking to you from Miami at the university. I'm joined by two of our doctoral students who are being embedded within the Miami Police Department, Joel Lee Silcox and Kimberly Preslowski. I think we also have the whole team with us, the Crime Analysis Unit and the Command, Major Rodriguez, Lieutenant Ramirez, and Sergeant Sanchez. They're all listening in, so we should be well equipped to answer any questions that you might have about the project. As this project has unfolded, I've come to think of it in kind of two illustrations. And the first is, if you might recall, this old 1950s song called Dim Bones, which I think is largely considered a child song. And in that song it says the hip bone is connected to the leg bone, and the leg bone is connected to the knee bone, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it exemplifies the interconnectedness between the organizational body of a police department and how each distinct unit has the ability to influence other aspects within the organization. And the second scenario is something that you might hear in the halls of doctoral programs across the country, and that is what's sometimes told to graduate students, that you're going to learn more outside of the classroom than you learn inside of the classroom. If I do my job correctly over the next few minutes, hopefully those two themes will become apparent for you as I talk about how our project unfolded. So in doing that, I'm going to tell you kind of a background story of how we got to where we are, talk a little bit about what we know about embeddedness within the literature and partnerships between academics and police organizations that we learned from. And then we're going to talk more specifically about some of the features of our project, the culture clash between academics and researchers and policing organizations, talk about our training, some of the changes that took place, the benefits that we observed, and many of the hopefully sustainable changes that the project has achieved. The original conception of this project was to implement a predictive analytics software function within the police department. At the time, it was gaining a lot of attention and popularity, and the thinking was that this might be a potential solution or perhaps a quick fix to provide some sort of data-driven information to police commanders and administrators to help them direct their operations and better inform their operations. After reviewing the available evidence base on evaluations of this, after sitting through many site visits and presentations from different software vendors, it was decided by the department to change gears and change focus. And instead they decided to really build up and invest in the analytical capacity of the unit as a whole. And that included investing in the human capital that exists within the unit, as well as the data systems and the processes that took place. The project had arrived at two specific goals. The first was to improve the analytical capacity of the unit, of the department, and in doing so, a second goal was to launch a project devoted to reducing theft from motor vehicles, which has been a chronic problem throughout South Florida for many years, a kind of a drip feed crime problem. and it utilized a problem-oriented policing and a situational crime prevention framework to try to achieve those goals. In the beginning, I was enlisted as the research partner to do the evaluation, as if any of you are familiar with the SPI program and the Smart Policing program in the role of a research partner. But as the focus of the project changed in this second phase or second period, we moved from external researcher to embedded criminologist, and it took the role of two of our doctoral students going to work within the police department, within the crime analysis unit, for 20 hours a week per each one. I would be down every other week for meetings and provided assistance and guidance off-site from there. It also comprised of bringing in an external consultant who is an expert in data engineering to come in and rework and revamp and try to make the data systems more efficient. So within that arrangement of the external consultant, the embedded criminologist, my role in overseeing and working with them, doctoral students on the problem-solving initiative, we all kind of let it go in sequential steps. And while the steps were very mechanical, that first we did this, then we'll do this, and then we did this, what happened within those steps was very much more organic and dynamic, and we kind of just figured things out as we went along. We facilitated training. We worked with the with the data engineer to identify opportunities for improving systems. We simultaneously did a problem analysis looking at the nature of 27Vs and formulating potential response strategies, etc. And as we began working in there, we looked for to the literature for any guidance that could help us out. We were certainly not the first embedded criminologist. There have been others. We were able to benefit from conversations with Ed McGarrell at Michigan State, who has some of his doctoral students working in police departments in his area. We found some examples in the literature. Anthony Braga worked embedded within the Boston Police Department. Joan Peter Celia shared her experiences as an embedded criminologist working in a prison setting. But we began putting together the different arrangements of, what do partnerships look like? And we came up with this sort of taxonomy or continuum from least informal to most informal. And quite possibly the much more common arrangement, which most probably police departments have engaged in over the course of their history, is some external interaction with a researcher on specific projects. And for much of the last 15 years, my relationship with the Miami Police Department and other agencies as well has always been an external researcher and working on maybe sequential projects and different entities and different aspects. And this was the first time that I've ever been involved with an embedded type of arrangement. And I'll have to say, based on these experiences, the benefits that were achieved from the embedded role were beyond anything I had seen before, and I don't think the changes and transformations that we have observed in this project could have ever been achieved from an external partnership arrangement. As we started working within the department, or the doctoral students in particular, we began to see some of the things that were also highlighted and identified in the literature of just the unique differences between academics and policing organizations. Incentives are different. What academics value and what they're measured on is very different than what police are measured on. Transparency is very different, whereas in the scientific communities, transparency is the ultimate foundation for replicability and external assessments and reviews. In policing circles, they tend to value secrecy for a variety of different reasons. And language is different. The operational tempo is different. Researchers tend to take time to gather and dissect and analyze, whereas officers and police administrators need to act very rapidly to pressing problems, et cetera. And so those became apparent as we were working within, but I think we arrived at a consensual agreement. We recognized the differences, and we kind of moved past them and accepted one another for who we are, if you will. So within the training component of the project, we launched at the beginning to kind of set the platform. We facilitated 2 formal training sessions. We brought in a national expert in crime analysis to come in so that we're all kind of on the same playing field in terms of terminology, analytical skill sets, ways of thinking about problem solving and problem analysis. And those 2 formal trainings took place. And then following that, we had a whole series of more organic, informal interactions and transferring of information and ideas between the doctoral students and the crime analysts. The crime analysts taught the doctoral students the systems, the internal systems, and how to do things within the organizational framework. And the doctoral students shared with them things that they picked up in research methods classes and statistical analysis in their advanced GIS analysis, and then as well as the things we were doing in our problem-solving analysis of the theft from motor vehicles. So there was just an open dialogue and discourse that took place. And I think the greater advancements took place in those more informal arrangements in the informal settings. The doctoral students were given desks and computers right in the same room with the crime analysts, and they work side by side, and they're there to share ideas and offer support and assistance and just a kind of cohesive working environment that turned out, I think, to work very well for furthering things. And so as it unfolded, we began identifying many opportunities for ways to alter the data systems that would make them more efficient. In the past, the crime analysts spent a great deal of their time creating crime logs that could be reviewed and assessed. The data engineer was able to automate the production of those crime logs, which freed up a tremendous amount of time for the analysts that allowed them to really engage more centrally on problem analysis and other specialized analytical tasks that became requested of them for different things. They began utilizing the new analytical outputs upon request for task force support to inform their operations. They began receiving greater requests for analytical products by commanders and neighborhood resource officers and problem solvers in support of their activities. Another organic diffusion was the use of OneNote, a kind of a qualitative search function that was brought into the unit but then disseminated to other units for them to use, the gang intelligence, the detective units, to help improve the efficiency and the flow of information amongst their people. It's allowed for the streamlining of software systems, reducing the redundancies of software, improving record management systems. All sorts of things just kind of happened as this analytical and this fusion came together for the process to evolve. And as I mentioned before, the benefits of being embedded, I think, are very unique to being embedded. And so, for one example, we think of training, right? That's kind of the knee-jerk response. Okay, we need more training. We need more training. We need more training. We send them to, analyst training or whatever the training might be. But I think the greater challenge is learning how and figuring out how to implement what is learned in those training sessions into your daily task or into your specialized task. And so I think that having that cohesive work group there help that transference of taking, formal ideas and learning how to utilize it for our specific problems, our specific tasks, and how can we do those things. And had we not been embedded, I don't think those things would have happened as readily. The bulletins were refined. There was greater specificity in the crime analysis work products. There's greater task force support. So those were all kind of more immediate, apparent things that took place, but a more latent thing that we observed happen was there began to be greater credibility of the crime analysis unit within the department. In the past, the analytical function was largely secretarial. They were keeping crime logs, basically counting crime, but they weren't really producing usable knowledge or usable information that could inform operational decision making. That has now changed. Now they're being called upon for unique and specialized analysis for that very reason, to inform operations. And I think they're viewed as a more professional unit for doing what analysis should be doing. We also observed this strange interconnectedness between the organizations as other units within the department learned about our project and learned what was going on and saw some of the work products coming out. They began taking some of the ideas that were developed in the crime analysis unit and applying it within their own unit. So we saw a spillover there. We also saw greater involvement of crime analysis in the CompStat process to support and inform what was going on there or what was not going on within different areas. It improved trust. Again, they automated tasks, able to adopt new data systems. They're currently moving towards adopting ArcGIS Pro, which will give them many more capabilities, greater specificity. And the rewards were not just for the police department. The rewards were also for the students and for the researchers. Because despite what professors might like to think, the greatest reward for a student is not to write a term paper for many hours, give it to a professor for a grade, and then it goes in a trash can. The ability for the doctoral students to use the analytical techniques that they've learned in their methods and their stats and their GIS courses for real-world crime problems was very rewarding. And I saw the light bulb and the glow in the doctoral students as they created new findings and they figured out certain crime patterns. And it was really a rewarding process. I think some of the doctoral students had early ideas of going into academia, and now I think they have ideas of going into police crime analysis. So I think that's an ultimate testament to how rewarding it's been, and it's just been individually fulfilling to see the transformation and to see the progress that was made. I've alluded to some of these changes that have taken place as a result of the project that will most likely be permanent and sustainable after the project is over. They've created new units based on the analysis of theft from motor vehicles, both detective and tactical. They split a operational neighborhood area or net area into different zones based on analysis and recognition that there are very different crime problems going on in each and processes. They're expanding the use of license plate readers and cameras into different hotspot areas. Revamping their signage to try to create better informed visitors and citizens in terms of locking their vehicles, etc. We're seeing a diffusion and a greater use of crime analysis function in CompStat meetings, cultivating intelligence and fusing it together. They've restructured the crime analysis and intelligence unit, brought it all together rather than previously having it separated. They're seeking and working on updating the record management systems. All of these things have kind of centered around the improved use of data and intelligence and thinking about ways of how they can change the organization and the processes to make it more efficient and ultimately more effective. For those of you who might be here thinking about facilitating your own embeddedness project from the researcher side, I think you've got to be cognizant of the cultural differences, and from the policing side, don't expect them to see things the same way that you see them, and don't expect them to do things the same way that you do. For the researcher, be the guest, be supportive, not critical. Build relationships, demonstrate your utility, that you're there to make everyone look good the best that you can, and you're there to support, and you're all there to work towards a common goal that is determined by your project. So I think those are just some lessons that we learned in doing that. And so if you do engage in some sort of an embedded project or partnership, I think you will also find that the hip bone is connected to the leg bone, and different organizational units will evolve as changes are made. And I think you will also find that you learn more outside of the classroom and applying and doing and seeing and working your way through than you do inside the classroom. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephanie Sickinger. I'm the Crime and Intelligence Manager for the Milwaukee Police Department's Fusion Division. And unfortunately, Captain Thompson is unable to make it to this webinar today. He was at a conference yesterday, and he was supposed to be on his way home last night. However, due to weather, his flight got canceled, so he is still on his way back home. So apologize for that. He's very sorry he couldn't make it. But lucky you all have me now. So a quick background about myself. When it comes to working for the Milwaukee Police Department, I've been with MPD just under 7 years now. I started off as a crime analyst, much like the doctor was just kind of reciting to. I started off almost like as an intern, and then I came onto the department, was able to hire full-time, and then I was promoted 3 years ago to a crime and intel manager, which kind of just a fancy title for the fact that I actually manage all the tactical crime analysts that are located in the Fusion Division. So kind of what we were alluding to earlier, the presentation that I kind of have for everybody who's on the call today, the webinar, I apologize, is more of a little bit of a history lesson and a lessons learned of where Milwaukee used to be when it came to analytics, what the expectations were, to how we were able to really kind of push some of the boundaries and grow our analytical unit, our capabilities, and really, really push for those stronger relationships among investigators, frontline officers, command staff, and executive command staff. So the first piece I want to talk about is this bullet point of building analytical capacity. So when the analytics started in Milwaukee, they were around even before I came on. I came on in 2012. Again, a very small unit. But when I started, we had two defined areas, if you will, when it came to analysis. Anybody on the phone kind of familiar with the different types of crime analysis? The Fusion Division, we were often tasked with what we refer to as tactical analysis, right? So looking at those current trends, series, patterns that are happening right now, and doing what we can to interrupt those series that are currently happening. And then there's another location in the department that we refer to as OMAP, that stands for the Office of Management Analysis and Planning. And they also have crime analysts assigned there, but their primary focus is a lot of the strategic side of the house. So they're working with a lot of the very large data sets, talking about comparing numbers, over 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, talking about projections, things like that. So that's just a very brief overview of the types of areas that we have analysts located in. So when we were worried about building analytical capacity, like I said, we started off with very small units, both in Fusion and OMAP. So I've been at Fusion for my whole career at MPD, and when we started, there were 3 of us that were analysts, and there were 3 analysts, more like 2 analysts that were assigned to OMAP. And OMAP, I'd be remiss if not saying that they work very exclusively with the chief's office, so anything that the chief needs, whether it be a news conference coming up or a big presentation that he or she has planned, they're obviously going to be the ones that are putting a lot of that together. So again, when we started, very, very small units. And it became difficult for us as analysts where we wanted to really start building relationships with officers, with investigators, and we wanted to let them know that we have these capabilities to help you with your cases, but because we didn't have a lot of us and the kind of requests that would come from outside of our walls, if you will, a lot of it, we got bogged down in kind of those kinds of requests, and we were not really able to help too much in the beginning of all of this, the fact that we wanted to help investigators, officers, and commanders on that one-on-one level, but just due to the amount of work, it just wasn't happening. So we had a lot of trouble in the beginning here with leveraging analytical capabilities. And Miami was talking about it too, is touching on this, the expectations. You know, what if this is the first time a unit is ever, a police department's ever going to have an analyst on board? You know, does anybody know what an analyst is supposed to do? Do they know what analytical products should look like? Do they have the ability to identify somebody who would be a good crime analyst for their department? Things like that. So what we were able to do, and I'll kind of talk about this in the next or going on through the presentation, we were able to demonstrate that we had a need in the Milwaukee Police Department for more analytics, and not just crime stats and things like that for like our CompStat meetings, but we had a greater need to help and assist in investigations. So we were able to be successful in that. It came at kind of a price when we had to have a lot of champions. We had to have a lot of sworn champions on our side that we convinced that they understood the type of force multipliers that analysts can be, and they went to bat for us when it came to our Common Council being able to approve the positions and then ultimately fund the positions in the department. So when we started off the area, like I said, both areas had about 3 analysts assigned to each. Now I can say, if you fast forward now to 2019, our current staffing. Myself, I actually manage 16 tactical crime analysts, and that covers 2 shifts. And then the OMAP analysts, they actually have, I believe, 6 analysts that are absolutely dedicated to the strategic and the administrative side of the house. So we've got a strong focus on the tactical side. Like I said, the next big push that we're trying to do when we're talking about leveraging data, the other piece that we're trying to push from the Fusion side is intelligence. The ability to effectively collect information, effectively analyze it, and put forth intelligence back out to our officers who are working the streets on a daily basis. So that's one of our big goals that we continue to keep going forward. In addition, when it comes to what the structure of our department looks like, with other areas, other police departments, I know it's going to vary greatly. I can tell you what works for Milwaukee. I think a lot of it has to do just generally how our investigative bureau, or where all of our detectives work, that we mimic kind of that model. So we are centralized units. There are 7 districts in the city of Milwaukee, but we're all located in one building. 2 different offices, but we're all in one building downtown. And what we do on the tactical side of the house in Fusion is with my analysts, everybody you'll find, especially when you cultivate analysts and get more on your staff, everyone generally has the ability to wear multiple hats at any given time. And you kind of have to, especially in a fast-moving environment. So what we've done with our centralized unit is that a lot of times, we mimic what our criminal investigative bureau looks like. So with our detectives in Milwaukee, they're actually they're crime-type focused. So we've got burglary detectives, violent crime detectives who the majority are investigating non-fatal shootings. We have homicide, and we've got a robbery division, and on top of that we also have what we refer to as a special investigations division. And for all of those divisions, I have an analyst that's assigned to all of them, and their responsibility is to make sure that they are providing the kind of support that not only that the investigators assigned to that unit need, but also the lieutenants and the commanders of those areas. And then in addition, the benefits that come with this, the fact that we are a centralized unit, is all these units, they brief every single day. They actually brief multiple times a day. We're in the same building. We're in the same area. We can just walk upstairs, and now we have this face-to-face time with all these investigators about what's going on with the case, what kind of follow-up do they need. And the biggest thing I impress upon my folks is not to sit back and just wait for somebody to assign you something, but you're an active participant in these briefings. You're not just to sit there and sit in the back and just wait to be spoken to. If you see a time or if you see an opportunity that you can jump in on an investigation and that you would like to, you are absolutely encouraged to, and I expect you to be stepping up to the forefront saying, hey, you know, maybe you're looking for this nickname. I think I can jump on that and I can assist whatever investigator is doing that. And when it comes to a question about the districts, so right, it's not that we ignore our particular districts. So I do have an analyst who is assigned to work with all of the districts, and his responsibilities are obviously any requests that a commander might have at a district regarding their area of focus. He'll be our main contact for that. And in addition, all the districts, they too kind of have their own weekly or biweekly meetings that they meet with a large piece of their staff. And again, not just being a fly on the wall in those meetings, but being active, showing up to these meetings, coming, being that mouthpiece from the investigative side, being able to bring whatever information, intelligence, or data that we've collected from the Fusion side of the house and getting it out to the district. So it's more than, you know, just an email or a phone call. It's you're putting a name to a face. And I think that's really important when you're trying to talk about building these relationships and trying to push for this organizational change. When you're making mention that all of a sudden the idea that the opinion of the analytical unit shifts. It's not just like, oh, yeah, you guys do the numbers, or, oh, yeah, you guys make maps. Sometimes it's, no, you know who the analyst is, you know their name, you've got their number, and that you're in contact with them every day. So that was a big organizational shift that we've been, that I'm very happy to say that has definitely happened in Milwaukee, and it continues to grow as we go on. Again, kind of still pushing on this idea of making decisions and using data that way. Some of the more traditional ways that we have in Milwaukee, and we talk about accountability and problem solving when it comes to using analysts in that nature. We still do traditional CompStat meetings. I'm sure many people on the line probably do it at their organization as well. Might look very similar, might look very different. But what we currently do is we have about a CompStat meeting just about every month. And there's an accountability piece. So, right, we're taking a look at the different crime types that are going on with a particular focus in violent crime. But we track and we discuss current crime trends on both the citywide level and the district level. And again, this is more kind of, this information is kind of coming from the strategic side of the house. So a vast majority of this is all pulled and put together by the OMAP team. So they do a lot of work regarding this side. And in addition, with Chief Morales and the Milwaukee Police Department, there's been a very big push and a very big focus on getting the community back involved. That it's not just a district, right? Districts are made of neighborhoods of communities, things like that, and we need the community to work with us, and we need the community trust. So there's been a focus on specific neighborhoods that have a high frequency of violent crime. And it's not just, right, throwing numbers up, yes, they're down, right? If they're down, that's great, but let's go beyond that. What captains and representatives from districts, they are encouraged to obviously not only work with OMAP analysts, but Fusion analysts, and come up with a problem-solving approach at the neighborhood level, right? Really start from that grassroots level and figure out, yes, we're worried about the crime, but what is the driving force behind it? And then captains and decision makers at the districts, they have a great amount of flexibility to create and implement different initiatives specific to those communities and to those neighborhoods at that level, because they're all going to be very different. You're going to have a different level of engagement in all these areas, and you're also going to have a different level of community volunteers and things like that that would be resources that are going to be there to assist as well. Again, so they're given a lot of flexibility and leverage to be able to do that without having to follow like a massive plan for the whole city. They still come back though and they report out, and then the also big piece of this is if somebody is having a trouble in one area, you know, and a captain comes back from one of the CompStat meetings and says, we've had great success in this program, right? So now there's going to be a conversation about what can we do to replicate whatever programs worked well in this neighborhood, and how can we extend that to maybe how can we replicate this in this other area where we're not having as a great amount of success. So again, it is a traditional accountability and problem solving, but we do take it a step further, and we're talking about this problem solving approach at the neighborhood level. We generally focus on about, like I said, 13 different neighborhoods that just kind of have a high frequency of violent crime. And just when we're talking about measuring results and things like that, we do kind of like a traditional percent change when we're watching it. But I can tell you that currently, like in these neighborhoods that are very susceptible to having large numbers of violent crime, we're, in the 13 neighborhoods, 11 of them are all down in non-fatal shootings. So we still have a couple that we're working with. But so again, a good measure of success is making sure, taking that neighborhood approach, that we keep driving down violent crime in those areas. And the other big meeting that we have, again, coming from a problem-solving approach, is what we refer to as the shoot review model. So the Milwaukee shoot review model, if any other agencies out there do this, probably recognize that. I believe it was largely started by the Oakland Police Department, so that's where Milwaukee initially modeled what our meeting was going to look like that, and then we put our own spin on it. So it's not a complete copy of what Oakland does, but we wanted to kind of take it to that next step. We do have the ability, we have more analysts than Oakland does, so we've got more resources to kind of throw at this problem-solving approach, and that's what we did. So a shoot review model, the way we handle it in Milwaukee, so it's a focus on violent crime for the last 7 days, and violent crime being described as shootings and gun-related homicides. So what we do is we collect this information for the last 7 days, and it's not just, the numbers up or not, the numbers are down. We're collecting information about the suspect in the case, if there is any. What do we know about the victim? Do we know of any witnesses or persons of interest that were a part of this entire incident that could help us give more clarity to what's actually going on? And all of this happens every single Wednesday, and we have a discussion focused around what you would refer to as one of those problem analysis triangles, right? So we focus on locations, suspects, victims. So people, places, and space and time. That's all the kind of stuff that we're talking about in regards to the shoot review model. So it's up to the fusion analysts to actually collect and collate all this intelligence and information surrounding all of these aspects, whether they be locations, suspects, and victims. And another thing that we do, I think that's kind of unique, or again, kind of taking that idea and turning it up to 11, if you will, from the Oakland model, is we don't just focus on the location of the incident, right? That's important to know. But when we talk about locations of the suspects and victims, like what kind of crime is happening in and around the suspect's last known address, right? What kind of crime is happening in and around the victim's last known address? That could help us, that could provide some more information to us of why this incident actually happened. Maybe they live near each other, and you found out that there's been shots fired at both addresses within the last whatever it might be, right? And that might give you more information or more background of why this incident may have happened. But when we're working this in the beginning of the week, when we're gathering intelligence and information surrounding these different aspects of the crime, we also assign what we refer to as impact scores for each incident. And the analyst also plays a pretty big part in this as well, not just because we're gathering this information so we have it, but we also help lead the discussion on it. So every Monday morning, we look through all these cases, and like I said, it's a very information-heavy packet, so we kind of help draw everyone's eyes to the different areas that they want to be looking at. But we'll talk about different things that help us score each incident. And it's not like a very difficult algorithm, if you will. It's more about, there's a number of considerations that we take into account of if we think that there's going to be continued violence between the people involved, or that the opportunities that exist at these locations that in and of themselves are just going to keep happening, and so this location is always going to be a problem. So we assign scores as either high, medium, or low, and we'll do them for people and places. A high person or things like that is usually due to the fact that we have a belief that there's going to be, or strong belief that there's going to be retaliation between these two people or groups that are associated with these people. So, right, we're very worried about this, and we want to make sure that we're going to intervene and that we're not going to be talking about another shooting that they've all been involved in, 2 days later. And then we also do the same when it comes to a place, right? Maybe there's something we don't have a lot of information, whether it be the suspect or the victim. Maybe it's an unknown suspect. Maybe the victim has no history, so we have no reason to believe that they were engaged in any any, illicit activity, but maybe there's something about the location. Is it a problem gas station, a problem bar? And what can we do, again, from that problem-solving approach to mitigate any further violence that's going to be coming as a result of that? And so there is a document after we put all this information together. We have our meeting on Wednesday. It's actually currently going on right now, so I'm not there today. So my team's handling it while I'm gone. But we have a big open discussion about it. And so it's less of like a presentation and more of a discussion about each incident. And then for every single case, we identify different mitigating strategies. And again, not just that, oh, hey, we need to make sure we're showing photo arrays, we need to make sure we're doing phone dumps and things like that, because that's part of the investigation. We know that's going to happen. We know it's going to be carried out. We'd like to hear the results of it, but what we're very much interested in and worried about is the mitigation. What are we going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again, whether it be between the people, or what can we do to mitigate the problems that are happening at each location? And the general feeling that I've gotten with people coming from shoot reviews, it's a really good metric just to make sure nothing is slipping through the cracks when we're talking about violent crime, because there's so much to do on every single case. But what we have been able to take a look at here from our recent homicides and non-fatal shootings, year to date, I know our current homicides are roughly, we're down about 17% than we were last year. That was good because last year was actually a pretty decent year for us. And then our non-fatal shootings, too, were also down roughly around 20% from this time last year. So we're very happy about that. And if I'm not mistaken, too, we're doing a very good job on the clearances of our non-fatal shootings. I believe the clearance rate for our non-fatal shootings sits right at about 35 to 40%, which is kind of a little unheard of, especially when you're talking about shooting incidents and not particularly the ones that aren't homicide. Because we experience a lot of the same kind of problems I'm sure other large agencies do, right? Victim cooperation is a big one. So the fact with all of that stacked on top and the fact that we've got these meetings, too, in the shoot review model, that we don't just have the police department meeting and talking about this every single week, because we could easily do that. But the other big piece, and it comes very important when we talk about mitigation strategies, are the partners that are in the room. So we have our traditional other law enforcement partners are there, our departments of corrections are there, our probation agents are there. We have representatives from our federal agencies, FBI, ATF, they're there to assist us as well. Our DA's office is there. But we also have a researcher in the room from the Medical College of Wisconsin, and they are also one of our really great resources to reach out to other community groups, community liaisons, to help us start, again, having the community's assistance in helping us mitigate this violence. And they also help us a lot when it comes to referrals. If there's anybody that we can refer additional resources to, whatever they may be, more kind of on the social worker side, they also play that role too. So that's been hugely important when we're talking about our crime numbers being down, keeping an eye on violent crime, and again, that big piece of making sure that we're working with the community to help us solve our cases and actually to keep the violent crime down. So those are just the two main meetings. There's many others in between there, but these ones are, both CONSTAT and Shoot Review are definitely utilized and put together, and a lot of it run by the analysts here. So that's been a very, very big help. So earlier in the presentation, I was talking about analysts as a force multipliers. And the one thing I wanted to touch on here, and this is verbiage that I've stolen from my captain, Captain Thompson, when he talks about working with analysts, is like anything else, technology or people and things like that, right? Nothing's going to be the silver bullet. You're not going to be able to buy one piece of software that's going to answer all your questions. In fact, usually what you need is, no matter how nice the software is, it's probably going to be missing something, and it's not going to be able to take into context your city, your problems, and things like that. It'll be able to compute and ingest data, but you really need to have the analyst on the other side to help interpret it. So at MPD, these are just some examples that we have when we talk about technology and analysts and being able to turn it into a force multiplier. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the use of Tableau. Now, Tableau is a very nice piece of software. It is it can be pricey, I should say, but Tableau is nice because it has the ability to dynamically visualize data and to disseminate and it's very easy to create dashboards to disseminate to the entire department and community partners, which we do. So we've got any number of dashboards that are updated on a daily basis, and everything from doing different trends that are happening in different districts, being able to track shootings, non-fatal shootings. We use a Tableau dashboard during the shoot review model, and a lot of our comp stat slides and dashboards now are all coming from Tableau. And so being able to have that, being able to be a commander and not have to worry about having somebody run this information for you every single day, that you can come in, open your email, and there it is. These are all the metrics for your district for the day. And as the decision maker, you've got more information in front of you to help you make better, more informed decisions. And that was the big thing when we were looking at Tableau, is being able to find a piece of software that's easy to consume and that we can update readily, and that, again, it's helping people make decisions based on that. And again, the Tableau dashboard, that's actually largely handled by what I was referring to earlier as our OMAP analysts. They built some very great, very intuitive, very nice interactive dashboards for us that even on the Fusion side of the house, our Fusion analysts, we use them daily as well. So kind of helping analysts there that say, hey, this would be great if you guys could pull this information and have it available, whenever we need it. So that's been a big help to us as well. In addition, we have a technology that we refer to as ShotSpotter. For anybody out there who's unaware of ShotSpotter, it's a gunshot detection system. I can't tell you how many cities it's out there, but we've had it for quite some time. And I think maybe the unique piece about Milwaukee and the ShotSpotter is we try to do more with the ShotSpotter data than just strictly use it as a patrolling tool or a reactionary tool. Much like any other department, right, we have ShotSpotter. There's apps that officers can download and put on their phone. They can also put it on their computers in their squads, right, and they can self-dispatch to these alerts. But what we try to do is we try to consume our ShotSpotter data a little bit more than just there's an alert and people respond to it. So ShotSpotter allows you to have access to the data. So you can actually extract all your alerts, and we leverage it, again, beyond that initial call for service. And I have an example of this on the next slide that I can show you guys. But what we're able to do is just in general to help commanders who have ShotSpotter in their district, help them make more informed areas. Here's the example right here of ShotSpotter, is we create what we refer to as the 21-day ShotSpotter report. So this example here is, like I said, it has 21 days worth of ShotSpotter data. This is just a zoomed-in area. But what we're able to do is create some very basic density maps for commanders so that they know that these are the different areas where you have the highest clustering of shots that are going on. And then on top of that, right, we just kind of very, very quickly highlight out the different hotspots or the different clusterings that happen. And then we also give the actual boundaries of those hotspots. And then we can talk about, for the last 21 days, we give them the highest concentration of gunfire. So we give them the temporal piece, right? So it's great that you have the map, but I'm showing you where they're happening, but now I'm also going to tell you when they're happening. And every hotspot, this is usually a multi-piece page report. We send it out there, and every hotspot has its own temporal piece along to it as well. So you're a decision maker, and you want to get back there, and you want to try to actually put squads in an area. We try to provide guidance on here's where you have the most number of gunfire alerts going off, here's the time, and here's the time that it's happening at to kind of help shift that before. We've also used ShotSpotter as a valuation tool before in the past, in the fact that we knew that, and it was another case that was actually brought up at shoot review, we had a very, very small area of the city that was just very much just getting lit up with gunfire in a very short amount of time. Again, taking that problem-solving approach from the from the shoot review model, we found out what had happened is that a offender had recently been released from prison, and he was very upset that his past drug territory had been taken over. So he was very intent on getting it back, and so then we had a lot of these running gun battles. And again, it was kind of the community was very scared of these people that were running and gunning in these areas, so we didn't have a whole lot of information from the community, but we had ShotSpotter. And ShotSpotter was letting us know that you had just got this inordinate amount of gun crime that's happening in this area, and then we did have a shooting, and so now we're zoomed in on it, and we found out all this additional information later. We were able to do focus enforcement in the area and be able to arrest the subjects that were all responsible for these running gun battles. We went to ShotSpotter. We did, I believe, a week-by-week comparison, and it dropped dramatically, where we literally only had one alert, and it was, I think, the day prior that we did, that we were doing all the arrests based on that. So ShotSpotter, too, can also be a potential evaluation tool when you're trying to kind of diagnose what's going on in an area. The other technology that we use in the Milwaukee area is what we refer to as, we have a NIBIN program. Again, NIBIN being National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. And then we have that in conjunction with a Crime Gun Intelligence Center, also referred to as CJIC. And the reason I talk about this as a force multiplier, not just on the technology itself, because the technology itself is great when you're talking about being able to link different gun crimes together based on the casings that are left at the scene. But again, I have an analyst assigned to this, and he's very much aware of the entire process that NIBIN goes through, what it all entails, and more importantly, what it means to the investigator at the end. If anybody out there has ever worked with a NIBIN case, they can get particularly complex. Multiple people get involved, different incidents get thrown in there, and then you have different types of guns. They can grow to be very, very complex investigations. And so with having an analyst on board who's able to clarify the links between cases, right, what guns actually link to what crimes, who was at those crimes, and then the significance of those people. So you have the gun linking crimes, but then you also can have an analyst side by side talking about the significance of the people between those different gun crimes. So this would just be an example of what we've done in the past about using technology and things like that to help us with a CJIC investigation. So right in front of you, this is an anonymized link chart, but this is based off on a real case. So again, this is a visual representation about a number of incidents that a group of folks kept shooting back and forth at each other at. But if you can imagine that you're a CJIC investigator and this NIBIN case gets dumped on you and it links to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different other NIBIN cases. On top of that, you've got anywhere from 10 to 15 people, and your job is to investigate this case and clear all these cases, right? This is a very daunting task, because especially if you're an investigator, you don't have this link chart yet. You probably have the 10 to 20 IRs sitting right in front of you. So again, having an analyst right there, being able, who's ingrained and embedded when it comes down here to the NIBIN and the CJIC program, being able that they have the ability to create this very, very basic visual, so kind of at a glance you can try to get an idea of who's shooting at who showed up at what incident, and what guns are being used. For anyone who's got any questions, the technology that we use for this is I2 Analyst Notebook. I think people are probably fairly familiar with it, but it's a link charting software, and it lets you create links between people, places, and things that you find in incident reports. And kind of wrapping up the presentation here, the other thing that I think is very important when it comes to having analytics and using data, and not just using it, just to say that you're using data. I think when you really have people paying attention to that kind of information, you can really push for the creation of new processes, so we don't get stuck in the whole, well, this is how we've always done it, or this is how we used to do it, and this is the only way anybody knows how to do it, so we keep going that way. So having the analysts and having an analytical team that can kind of push those boundaries and who are genuinely curious and have an interest in this allows, and if you have the ability to allow them to kind of run with these ideas, not just obviously that they come from the academic side having this information, but having worked with the police department, understanding what the needs of the department would be. So some of the new processes that I can elaborate on, particularly just from the Fusion side of the house, is talking about our first one, our offender-based initiative. If anyone's been in any other webinars, our NAC list, also known as the Networks of Criminals and Youth Offenders, is a very good program, and that was used again as a problem-solving approach. We knew that the numbers were going up. Our motor vehicle thefts and our robberies kind of started to get away from us, starting back in 2014, and then it was an analyst who realized there was actually a network of people. Not a network in that it was a highly organized crime, but the fact that there's a lot of people committing these crimes, and they all know all these other people that are committing these crimes. They were largely juveniles in nature, and like I said, it was an analyst who came across this original group, then approached the captain at the time and said, hey, I've got this idea that I think that we can start looking at the right people who are severely impacting our motor vehicle thefts and our robberies that are going on. So born from this is what we refer to as the Networks of Criminals and Youth Offenders list. Again, it began the problem of youth offenders, particularly with motor vehicle thefts and robberies. And now it has also graduated into, now it's not just strong arm robberies. We've got many included in weapons law violations, so they're carrying firearms. And now, again, I'm sure it probably fits a lot of the nationwide tracking is the fact that there are, everything is now escalating into carjackings. So we have a lot of these subjects that we identify on this list also fall into this category that they're getting more dangerous kind of as this progression of events as opposed to just motor vehicle theft now, robberies and carjackings and shootings, and we've had a few of them involved in homicides as well. And the great push for this is it took a while for the department to catch on. Sometimes, right, people can be very leery that these names came out of computer, if you will, or an algorithm and spit them out. It's not how it works. There's a whole like 2-hour presentation about everything that goes into the NOC program. But when you kind of got these wins, the program has turned from nobody had any idea what we're talking about to the fact that now we've got summaries where we're talking about different crime series and stuff like that that has happened, you know, over the weekend or something like that, and people are going out and they're recognizing these names. So that's a NOC offender. That person showed up on the NOC list. I know where I can find more information about that. And that was something that took a long time, but it was at the persistence of the analysts who believed in the program and wouldn't let the program die, and they keep revamping it, and they're always looking to make it a better list. And I think that's really important too when you're talking about new processes. And kind of the last big one I'll wrap up here is a new technique that we're still working through, but we have been able to successfully leverage it, is this idea called social network analysis. And social network analysis is being able to quantify relationships between people, generally trying to identify groups, crews, networks of people. We were introduced with social network analysis because it's actually a unique metric that we use in our NOC program. Because the idea, right, we knew that there was a crew of people working together, and if we're going to have an offender-based approach where we want to deter this type of behavior from other people to mimic their friends, if you will, we decided to use a social network analysis metric in this subject score, and that's what we refer to as eigenvector. Eigenvector, just a very fancy term, talking about highly connected people who also have friends who are very highly connected. So you're reaching a lot of the network when you kind of focus on those people who have those kind of higher scores. But that was just one example that we used that it's, again, it's taken into consideration with the NOC program. You can also use it on a smaller scale. And the first time we really carried out a full-on social network analysis operation was the one in District 5. And we were looking at to build out and identify our violent network. So anybody who's using SMA, again, you kind of get these different kinds of visualizations. But what we were able to do, so what in front of you is what was referred to as a sociogram. And what you're actually seeing, those nodes, those little blue circles that you see, those represent people. And the bigger the node, the higher of the metric is that they're measuring. So the particular metric that we're looking at in this process is something that's referred to, or the centrality is betweenness. So we're looking for people who sit between different networks because we wanted to focus on them. So again, another problem-solving example. The history of this is a particular area in District 5. Again, another one of those neighborhoods that you have a lot of problems that we haven't really been able to crack what's going on. We're hearing from a lot of officers on an anecdotal note that they're very frustrated about the crime going on in these areas because the people who are committing crimes in this particular area do not live there. And so when you're trying to talk to people who actually live in the area saying, hey, what's going on, residents in that area are like, I have no idea who this person is. I don't have any information on them. So they weren't really weren't able to help the police in any way. So what we were able to do, as you can use it as a geography side, is we were able to grab everybody that was ever arrested in the area. It didn't necessarily mean that they had to live in this particular area that I'm referring to here. You look on the slides. It's the Capitol Drive area in Garden Homes. It's in the north side of Milwaukee, two particular neighborhoods that have always had a violent crime problem. So we're able to extract all the people who've ever been arrested for an offense in that area. And then we build a network out around those folks, right? Who else is probably likely coming to this area and causing all these problems? So the nodes that you're looking at, again, or the people, the ones that are larger are going to be the 20 subjects or the 20 people that have the highest betweenness centrality. Again, people who sit in between these networks, because the idea is the fact that we don't have a great amount of intel telling us what's going on and who's committing crimes in this area. So let's find people who sit between different groups that can provide us more information and more intelligence on these groups that are actually causing problems in this area. And particularly this one that you're looking at is looking at the 20 subjects that were out of custody. And there was an operation that moved forward that we were looking to make contact with these 20 subjects to let us know, literally just trying to gather intelligence. So when we think about an operation, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out there and look for wanted people and just arrest them and that's the end of the operation. It was actually more of a more focused intelligence gathering operation. And we didn't just focus on people who were out of custody, because some of that low-hanging fruit were people on this network who were actually in custody. And so we were actually able to send a few officers out to interview several subjects that would have fallen within this network that were out of custody, that were actually able to provide us names and gangs and the type of activities that were going on in particular houses that we needed to be aware of, because whether they're selling heroin or just their general, drug houses, and those were a lot of things that were driving the crime in that area. So again, it was this new idea. It's a new process that, yes, it's an operation, but it's not really your traditional wanted person sweep. We're sending people out there, and we're trying to gather intelligence. Again, kind of like a different approach that we hadn't really thought of before, because we didn't have the ability to identify those people in a network who might have more information than that you wouldn't even really know about, because maybe they don't really have very big criminal histories. So you don't have a lot of records. So these are people that we focused on who sat between other violent networks, and we were looking to gather intelligence from that. So my final thoughts just regarding to anybody who's on the line, when we were talking about looking for analytics, maybe you're looking to build analytical capacity or even hire your first analyst. The first big thing that we needed to get over in Milwaukee is that we needed to demonstrate a need of why we needed it, why it's important. And I think one of the largest contributing factors we had regarding that is we had a champion. We had a number of sworn champions that saw what we were doing, believed in us, as being an integral part of the department, and they really went to bat for us and said, this is why we need the analytical capabilities. And that's because a lot of us had built those relationships with these other investigators. And so once we were able to demonstrate that need, I'm a very big proponent of establishing, analysts needing to establish relationships with investigators. Being there face-to-face, knowing their names and working side by side, I think that was the best way for us to break down those barriers of people not understanding what analysis is or what we could do, right? Just show up and literally show them what you can do. Don't be a fly on the wall, and come forward to every meeting with the goal of trying to provide more information than what they started with. For us in Milwaukee, the centralization of our analyst units has been very, very effective for us, but I think it's going to depend on what other agencies are out there. It'll probably greatly depend on what you kind of want your analysts doing, whether it be tactical or do you want them side by side with the investigators and the detectives, right? Then they'll probably work better if they are kind of on that side by side. But being able, I'm still a very big proponent for analysts being able to come together and collaborate. The amount of information, right, offenders don't stay within their jurisdictions, right, they travel all throughout the city. So being able to have everybody, particularly analysts, being able to come together, bounce ideas off each other, throw names out there, I think is incredibly important, and we've seen a lot of success with that. And the last piece, when you're talking about trying to use data and trying to use analytics, right, it doesn't just have to be stats and things like that. Having a good analytical team, they're going to push for innovation. They're going to push for new processes, and they're not going to be okay with just the status quo. Everyone's going to want to take a step further. What could we do more? How could we make this more effective? And how can we build upon the good base that we already have? So that kind of concludes my presentation. Hopefully I hit the points that everyone was kind of looking for there.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you so much to the Miami team. for agreeing to participate today. We will now open up for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, please feel free to chat them to us in the chat feature or through the Q&A feature. We do have 2 questions that we've received so far. The first question is going to be for the Miami team, and the question is the program in Miami somewhat similar to what Baltimore is implementing now within their communities? All departments are working together as one cohesive task force from every law enforcement agency, including the federal agencies. So, Rob, I'll turn that over to you to take lead on.
In terms of this specific project that I was presenting here, it specifically does not involve that sort of collaboration. But there are other projects and initiatives within the department involving violence reduction approaches that involve other agencies. Is it similar to what's going on in Baltimore? I can't fully answer that because I'm not versed at or informed about what is happening in Baltimore. But there is an initiative that involves federal and state and local agencies in Miami.
Great, thank you, Rob. And the second question is going to be for you, Stephanie. Is Aura used for dark web analysis or everyday social media, or can it be used for both?
All right, I apologize. I kind of skimmed right over what Aura is. So Aura actually, and social network analysis, just so everyone's on the line, actually it does not start with social media. What it actually is being able to take physical connections between people. So Aura is a visualization software that allows you to, a fancy word they refer to them as edgeless, but honestly they're kind of just spreadsheets of connections between people. And you upload that into Aura, and the people become your nodes, and your links, how you have people linked to each other, that's where your links come from. So it's actually not a software that skims and grabs that information. You have to upload that, your edgeless, if you will, into Aura. But it's more, like I said, of your physical connections, if you will, to people, and it's not based in social media.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. A third question that just came in is also going to be sent your way, Stephanie. So with regard to the dashboards that you spoke about, are they available to the public? In examining the data analysis results, have communities been made aware of findings? And if so, to what extent are they involved in generating ideas and problem-solving solutions to address those issues?
Sure. So with the dashboards, if I'm not mistaken, we do, there's a number of aldermen in the city of Milwaukee that I believe that they get dashboards and they get information sent to them that way. We're looking to work more closely with our city hall to try to be able to provide information that way. I believe they have a Tableau license as well. When it comes to the larger, I think that last question they're talking about the community's involvement in making those decisions and things like that. When it comes to the shoot review, we're trying to do, the other big piece is the Oakland model has, that they're very superior in what we're working through right now, is trying to get a community like shoot review model that goes through and works through and being able to present that kind of information. When it comes to other problem-solving approaches, I mean, we do have neighborhood watches and things like that where there's officers and commanders that attend all of those. That's probably be the closest when it comes to that one-on-one asking about problem solving. But we do have, like I said, that liaison from the medical college. We actually have 2 of them now. So we're hoping to expand that more than outside of just our law enforcement realm, but to get that more into the community realm.
Well, thank you, Stephanie and Rob, for taking the time to answer those questions that we received. I now want to turn it over to Dr. Scott Decker for closing comments. So, Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Samantha, thank you again, and thank you to both of our presenters today. I know that for me, going back to look at the webinars again is always useful, and in particular as the details of a process or a software are mentioned. The 2 things I want to briefly mention are, one, I think the most important thing I learned from each city was the process they went through to arrive at a model that worked didn't happen overnight. It wasn't taken out of a box and uploaded on some cloud or some system, that it required face-to-face meetings and trials and working together in good faith. And so, you know, we didn't get in these crime problems overnight, and we're not going to get out of them overnight. But through time, both cities, with different processes, made a profound process that worked. And the second is the real critical importance of both data and analytic tools. Tableau is one such data visualization tool that a lot of departments are using and finding to be effective, but being open to others, particularly with more advanced social network analysis capabilities, could also prove to be useful. We want to thank everyone for participating today, acknowledge the continued very positive support of our sponsor, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and again, thank both our presenters, and hope you'll join us as we'll keep you notified of the next webinars that will be presented. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.